Hello everyone and welcome to the vintage side. In this video I'll be showing you how I take these 5 pillowcases and turn them into this lovely vintage dress here. Here I have 5 pillowcases and I found these in an op shop. When I saw them I thought that this beautiful floral design would make a lovely dress. So I grabbed them all and the first thing I need to do is unpick every single one of them. I will then iron all the material. I finished unpicking all of the pillowcases. I've ironed them. I have also ironed all of my pattern pieces and I have my pattern instructions. The instruction sheet goes through the information that is needed to make this dress. Now, some prior knowledge of dressmaking is required with most patterns. So this particular sheet does not have a lot of extra instructions about how to sew specific things. This one lists all of the pattern pieces that you get with this pattern. This dress comes in 2 different styles, one with sleeves and one without, and it tells you which pattern pieces you'll need depending on which style you're making. It also gives several suggestions for how to place the pattern pieces on your material depending on how wide your fabric is from selvage to selvage. And then on the other side is the instructions for actually making up the dress step by step. I will be making view 2, which has no sleeve and is all in one color. To make this dress, firstly we need to sew together the darts on the front and back of the bodice. Then we attach the collar. Then we sew the side seams of the bodice and then we start on the skirt. All the panels of the skirt are sewn together. This dress wraps around in the front and is closed by buttons. Once the skirt is sewn, we then attach the bodice, finish off all our hems. This pattern gives instructions for how to make a belt using belt backing, which would have been purchased from a fabric store. It tells you how to measure the fabric so that it fits around the belt backing and then you create a belt. I do not have belt backing, so based on the measurements, I will figure out how big I need to cut the material. And then we need to also do the buttons and the buttonholes, and then the dress is complete. Here I have the front bodice piece. Now you may have noticed that this pattern does not have any ink, so the markings are given by different sized perforations throughout the pieces. We have 2 different sizes of circles and we also have notches. The larger circles indicate where to place the fabric on the straight grain, and the small circles indicate where darts will come together and also the seam allowance. And then the notches indicate where I will line this piece up with the back shoulder, and my notches need to be in line so that my pattern pieces will sew together perfectly. My pattern instructions have explained, so that's how I know what to do. I have attached the collar facing. The next thing to do is attach the top of the collar, and the collar has a little feature. There is a little imitation lapel on either side of the collar. My pattern piece has given me indications of how to do that. Here's the indication on my pattern piece. I have two sets of perforations. The first set is this triangle and the second set is this square. When I sew the two pieces of the collar together around the outside, I will follow this first triangle. I will come down, I will stop here, I will pivot, I'll go in, pivot back out, and then continue with my seam. So that is how I am going to get that little indent which is in the collar. And after I've sewn it, I will then cut this so that I can turn it inside out, and then I'll iron it. The second set of perforations is for when I do the top stitch feature on the outside of the collar. So I will sew my top stitching and I will pivot at each of these points to create that little square detail which is part of the top stitching. I have just realized that I have made a bit of a mistake with the collar and the bodice, and I have to backtrack a little bit. When I was reading through the instruction sheet, I had a look at the sewing order, and when I got to this step, which is for making the white feature that is on this dress, I skipped over this step because I thought, okay, that's all about putting on this decorative white area here. I'm not doing that on my dress. So I continued on doing the next step of the collar, which you've seen. And then when I got over to here, it explains how to finish the collar on the inside. And you finish the collar by sewing it to the facing. And I stopped and thought, hang on, I haven't got any facing on this side of my information. There is no pieces provided for me to cut out the facing. And then I read the instructions a bit more carefully, and I have one little line of information just here in the cutting notes which says bias facing, cut of remnants, and it's given me measurements 1 3/8 of an inch wide. Now I know what that means because previously in making garments, I have created facing from given pattern pieces. I know how to do it. I have got the pattern piece on the material and I'm cutting part of the outline. The pattern suggests to make the facing 1 3/8 of an inch wide. I've made mine a full 2 inches wide. If it's too big, I can always trim it back. So I've cut 2 pieces for the front and 1 piece for the back neck facing. So here is the collar. The area where I need to attach the facing to the collar has not been sewn down yet. This edge here is going to have the facing attached to it. Now you are supposed to do this while the collar is in 2 pieces and before you've attached it to the bodice, but because that seam is free, I can sew the facing to it now and it is not going to interrupt too much of what I've already done, and I will show you how I'm attaching the facing. Here is the collar. On the inside we have a slight angle which accommodates for this angle that happens here. So the collar is embedded in between the front piece of the bodice and the front facing. So it comes down into a point and it gets embedded in there, and then when the garment is worn, the collar turns back across the front of the bodice and we have that nice neat finished corner right there, and we have the same on the other side of the bodice. The next thing to do is to finish the collar and the facings up here at the back of the neck. To finish that off, I have this piece here, which is my back neck facing. The suggestion on the instruction sheet for finishing off the back neck facing is to turn back the front facings that are attached to the collar and hand stitch them to the shoulder seam on both sides. Then we take our back neck facing, attach it to this remaining area of collar at the back, and then turn it down and then hand stitch that at the same point at the shoulder seams. Here we have our skirt all sewn together. On one end of the skirt I have attached the facing panel, and that will get folded back, and that finishes one side of the skirt, and that is the side that overlaps over the front. Then the side of the skirt that is underneath, I have overlocked the raw edge and I've just sewn a straight hem on that side. Now I will attach the bodice. Here is the waist seam all complete, nicely overlocked together. I have ironed it, and now we're ready to do all of our finishings, which is hemming the skirt with bias tape and finishing off the arm openings also with bias tape. And I will finish the inside of my facing around the collar. I will turn under the raw edge or maybe overlock it if I can get that on the overlocker. I hung my dress for several days to allow the hem to drop. When you have sewn material on the cross grain of the material will adjust itself with the aid of gravity, and it will settle into a new position. I have gone along the hem and I have checked for any areas where it was uneven because the material shifted, and I have trimmed those away so that my hem is now now even. I will be using bias tape to hem this dress. I like using bias tape because it has some ease, which is helpful when you're going around curves of a skirt like this, and also because when I sew the inside of the hem, it will be invisible from the outside. This is commercial bias tape. It comes with the sides folded into the center. I have just opened up those folds, given them a quick press so they lay nice and flat, and then I will pin this onto my skirt. And when I sew it on the machine, I will follow one of the channels for my stitch, and then when I turn it under, I will fold the other one back and then hand stitch that in place. Now here I have the arm opening with the bias binding attached. This is a much smaller circle than the hem, and so I need to work the curves when I am hand sewing the bias binding down. Now because bias binding is cut on the cross, this edge will ease around the curves. So I will hand sew this a little bit slower than normal because I will work on getting that curve in place. I will flatten it, I will get the bias binding positioned on the inside so that you won't see it from the outside, and then I will fold this material over my finger and hold it tight to sew it down, because that's going to encourage the curves and the material to sit nice and flat. If I just went through sewing the hem without continuing to move the ease all the way around, my seam would become uneven because the material would be pulling. So I am going to ease it all the way around and continue to pull so that this edge opens up and it will lay nice and flat on the inside. So here is the arm opening with the bias binding all finished, and as you can see, that is lying perfectly flat. And if we look on the inside, you can see that I have pulled on this side to stretch that so it sits nice and flat against the bodice, and this outer edge has actually become bigger than the inner edge because of that stretching. So that is sitting really nice and flat now, really nice and flat. I'm really pleased with that. So it is a little bit more work, but the results that you get is worth it because it gives you a much nicer finish that is going to be lovely and comfortable when I'm wearing it. I have set my dress to the side for a moment because I am now going to work on the buttons and the belt. Unfortunately, I could not find any buttons that matched this dress. So what I'm doing instead is making my own covered buttons. I have found these buttons which are attached with a little stand on the back, so I can cover these in the material from the dress and then they will match perfectly. finished belt for my dress. I have just looped over the material around the buckle. I've hand sewn this down because I could not fit this under the machine at all, so I've hand sewn that with nice strong stitches. Now, because this belt doesn't have a spike, I have attached a press stud because when I'm wearing the belt, I don't want it to come undone. So I have just attached that press stud there, and when I'm wearing the dress, I can just close that, and I know that the belt is going to stay in place while I'm wearing the dress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding sewing, please pop them down below in the comment section and I will be happy to answer them for you. Please remember to like and subscribe and to ring the bell so you receive notifications every time I post a new video. If you do all of those things, it really helps my channel and I would really appreciate it. And I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.